This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. This week we're celebrating Earth Day, and in honor of the big blue dot we call home, we're digging into some potential solutions to the problems that plague our planet in a little series we call Operation Earth. Let's start this show talking about one option for renewable energy, wind power. Our modern day wind turbines are a relatively new part of the landscape, but wind energy has a long history. People first used wind energy to propel boats along the Nile River as early as 5000 BC. By 200 BC, simple wind-powered water pipes were used in China, and windmills with woven reed blades were used for grinding grain in Persia and the Middle East. As travel expanded, so did wind energy around the world. Merchants and crusaders brought wind technology to Europe after its use spread in the Western Hemisphere. Early American colonists used windmills to grind grain, pump water, and to cut wood at sawmills. They installed thousands of wind pumps as they settled the western United States, with small wind turbines being widely used until the late 1800s and early 1900s. But the onset of industrialization led us to a heavier dependency on fossil fuels, until an oil shortage in the 1970s led us back to greener alternatives. And although fossil fuels have dominated the US energy mix for more than 100 years, renewable energy production and consumption both reached record highs in 2020. That growth was driven mainly by record high solar and wind energy production. The latest data shows 12% of US energy comes from renewables, according to the US Energy Information Administration. 26% of that is wind energy, the largest source after biomass fuels like wood. The share of US electricity generated from wind grew from less than 1% in 1990 to about 9.2% in 2021. The wind energy industry, which includes both on-land and offshore wind farms, is expected to grow in part because of President Joe Biden's infrastructure bill. It contains funding for a modernized electric grid and long-distance transmission of such energy. The bill also contains funding for ports, which will help the fast-developing offshore wind industry. These factors are crucial as more wind and other renewable energy is deployed, but not everyone's a fan. Even the groups that want to see America use more renewable energy prefer other forms like solar power, arguing that the latter is easier for private residential energy production and requires lesser upkeep and land. They also don't make a noise that a windmill's blades can make with every spin. But wind energy is cheaper than solar to generate, can create more energy because it works overnight too, and generates less carbon dioxide in its energy generation processes. Wind energy in the US has also faced opposition from some groups on the right who cite the amount of land wind energy production requires, the noise its blades make, and how it can disturb or hurt local wildlife. Its main opponents include prominent Republicans like former President Donald Trump.
We are playing right into their hands, green energy. The windmills, they don't work. They're too expensive. They kill all the birds. They ruin your landscapes. And yet the environmentalists love the windmills. And I've been preaching this for years. The windmills, and I had them way down, but the windmills are the most expensive energy you can have. And they don't work.
Again, as far as cost goes, it's actually cheaper to build and operate new large-scale wind plants than to run existing coal plants. The cheap price tag is one of the main reasons behind wind energy's growth, according to Matthew Lackner, the director of the Wind Energy Center at UMass Amherst.
Onshore wind in the US is extremely cheap. It's basically the cheapest form of new electricity. I think typically producing power at around 3 to 4 cents a kilowatt hour. It's reliable, it's certainly affordable, and it's also carbon free. And so there's lots of reasons why wind energy has been growing, but those are the main ones.
But given that the majority of wind energy production in the country relies on a wind belt that runs through about 17 states that have the flat landscapes that allow for strong winds, many of which are GOP strongholds, the concerns and theories brought up by Republicans could directly influence how voters in that region see wind energy. Illinois is one of those states in America's wind belt, and recently launched an initiative to expand its wind energy production. Newsy correspondent Kat Sandoval made a visit to see how the wind farm hopes to help meet America's clean energy goals and how locals feel about it.
We drove to Clinton, Illinois, where the wind blows heavy and strong. For right now, these new turbines don't spin because they are under construction. But soon they will, part of a $345 million wind farm being built between Chicago and St. Louis.
I wanted to show you what the site looks like.
Evan Carruthers has worked in this industry for more than 20 years, and he's seen it change.
They used to haul 3 blades on one truck.
Got it.
Now it's, like I said, whenever we get over there and we actually walk next to a blade, they're huge. It's basically a football field. From the tip of the blade to the front of the truck, you're looking at a football field driving down the road.
He takes us around the Alta Farms Wind Project 2, set to operate fall of this year.
Find the spot where there's no mud. Well,
What is it made out of?
fiberglass. So we'll fly all the pieces up, and the blades will go on separate after the fact.
At another fully operational wind farm,
We bring everything back down to as tight as we can just for truck traffic, which gives landowners as much of the field back to them as possible so they can farm. After the power is generated at the turbine, going to underground collection lines to our substation. Then you'll see the 2 bigger poles in the middle. That's where the power from the wind farm is going out to the grid.
Carruthers sees firsthand not only how the turbine structures have grown, but also the business of alternative energy.
It's the future, definitely. That's what we're doing.
Enel Green Power, an Italian company behind Alta Farm, says the 50 turbines here are twice as big as previous models, which makes them more efficient at harnessing the wind. They produce twice as much electricity, which means fewer turbines to build. Once fully operational, the company says this wind project in a year can generate electricity to power more than 57,000 homes. That's 57,000 homes for a year. In the U.S. last year, wind power generated about 9% of our overall electricity. Fossil fuels still make up the majority of America's energy source. That means there's more room for the industry to expand. This as the Biden administration pushes and incentivizes clean initiatives across the country. Texas leads in wind energy, but Illinois is in the wind belt.
In the Midwest, it's been a boon for people who have land that's windy and can actually lease that land for wind farms.
It's an economic incentive for farmers who can lease their farmlands for 30 plus years and make between $8,000 to $80,000 a year per turbine, depending on how big they are. Also, the Nature Conservancy says the flat landscape means the project is less likely to hurt wildlife. Yet, while there are benefits to wind energy, it's a mixed bag, depending on who you ask. Thomas Martin's family has owned this farm in Mount Pulaski, Illinois for generations, about 30 minutes from Alta Farms. Here, the turbines are working, and while Martin chose not to lease his land for the towers, his next-door neighbor has.
We want clean air. We want, we want our world to be better for our families, our grandkids, and everything else. We're no different than anybody else, but we're impacted differently because they're putting the towers all around our homes and our farmsteads.
And this is what he sees some days, shadow flickers from the blades chopping up the sunlight. Sound can be an issue as well.
There's days that are like that. You won't hear a thing. There's other days, if it's blowing toward you, you'll hear the whooshing sound. It sounds kind of like to me, a jet sitting on the runway getting ready to take off. Not terribly loud, but it's there and it's always moving.
Martin worked alongside Enel when he served on an economic advisory committee for his city. He saw a boost of financial investments in his community, like a historic site and schools. But he is conflicted. Would you do it over again?
If I had to go back, I'd probably still say that I wouldn't want it here surrounding my home and surrounding.
You would or wouldn't?
I wouldn't.
Still, Martin notes Enel is working with the community to address concerns. The company says they are limiting shadow flicker hours at the new site.
My hope is that we can feel good 20, 30 years from now that technology gets better.
The U.S. is the second largest energy consumer in the world, right behind China. And as our energy consumption grows, so does the need for alternative energy. And wind energy is cheaper to produce.
It's really no question that wind is less harmful than other, fossil fuel.
The developers say the wind farm will create 10 to 12 full-time jobs and generate $44 million in property taxes over the next 25 years. Landowners will pick up another $50 million. For DeWitt County, that's a windfall that's hard to pass up. Kat Sandoval, Newsy, Clinton, Illinois.